It's the Nolan Carr Night Show, starring your host, Nolan Carr, and our very special guest this week, Sensei Ron Thomas. And now, here he is, the hostess with the mostest. Here's Nolan. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another very exciting edition of the show here on the Nolan Carr Night Show on all the audio and visual platforms as well. As always, if you've enjoyed episodes like this one, do us a favor by subscribing on YouTube, follow us on the audio platforms, clicking that thumbs up or like button so you can tell us you enjoy these episodes. Click that share out so you can continue to go the podcast with our friends and family, turning on post notifications so you can be up to date when episodes like this one are posted on those platforms, as well as following us on Instagram at Nolan Cart Night. I say all that because on this week's edition of the show, we have a very big guest who deserves a very huge introduction. From the days of growing up in the biggest little city in the world known as Reno, Nevada, Ronald Lee Thomas has led a life of success, prosperity, balance, and then some, which is all told in his new book, a self-help book called The Hidden Life Lessons of Mr. Miyagi. Whether taught by Wally J., Don Jacobs, Professor Toru Tanaka, or even a little-known comedian and actor named Pat Morita, he's taken what he's been taught and shared it with millions of people across the world, on and off the mat, irregardless about striking hard, striking fast, and no mercy. It's my immense pleasure to have Ron on the show this week on the show to not only talk about his book, but his life, experiences, and the recent 40th anniversary of a little-known cult classic film called The Karate Kid. Ron, how's it going? It's a pleasure to finally meet.
It's going well. Thank you, Nolan.
Well, I want to start like this. Obviously, congratulations on the new book. I've enjoyed reading it. I look forward to continuing to read it. What I want to start talking to you first about beyond the book and some of the stuff you've been a part of is as far back as we can go to little Ronnie's life many, many years ago. And in the book, you talk about it. In other interviews, you talked about, but you talk about a lot the first introduction you have to competition, to an adrenaline rush, to success as a little 3-year-old on the swimming block at a race with kids under 6 years old and being called Little Ronnie Thomas on the PA system. For you, beyond that memory, what other memories do you remember that stick out of you being addicted or curious about chasing that sort of adrenaline rush of competition, sports, and being successful, whatever it may be?
Yeah, competition swimming was my obviously my introduction. I was a natural swimmer. My dad was an outdoorsman and a fisherman, and what happened was I would go in his little fishing boat on the lakes around Reno, Nevada, and I would be hanging over the water of the in the boat trying to touch the water,
Yeah.
and he's like, I better get this kid in the swimming classes. And I was like 2 years old, and they put me in swimming classes, and the instructor said, this kid's a natural. You should get him on the team. So my dad did, and it was like an Olympic dream. I had at the time, Mark Spitz was the guy, not Michael Phelps. Mark Spitz had won 7 gold medals in one Olympics, and I had a full length 6-foot poster of Mark Spitz on my bedroom door with his 7 gold medals. And I wanted to make the Olympics, and I was very fast. I'm very fast in the
Sure.
water. And one of my memories, you brought up memories, is I was 12 years old, so I started competing at 3. Was named the youngest competitive swimmer in the world, and then I just every weekend it was swim meets, and then as I graduated in age and went up in age groups, I got obviously very good. I was in the water 5 days a week, 6 days a week, for a couple hours. And on the 12 and under category of the Nevada State Championships, my dad said, "You know what? If you win, I'm going to buy you that dirt bike that you've
All
always
right.
wanted." Because my friends were riding motorcycles and had a dirt bike, and so I won. I won the Nevada State Championships. My dad had to buy me a dirt bike, uh, but my mom and dad coming from I would classify it as relatively poor family means when they were younger. Had big dreams for me. Would have loved me to be in the Olympics. The only issue is I stopped growing at about 5'8". you know. And Michael Phelps, he's like I think he's 6'4", but
Yeah.
his wingspan from tip to tip on his hand from tip to tip is like 6'7",
Yeah.
and his feet are size 14.
That
So he's
helps.
wearing flippers, you
Yeah.
know. So these guys are very, very fast in the water because they're pulling and kicking a lot more water than I could at 5'8" with a size 9 shoe. So there you have it. But sports, growing up in Reno, Nevada, competitive golf was a big deal for me. Kind of wanted to go pro at one point.
Yeah,
Got a hole in one in the Nevada State Championships,
there you go.
high school championships, um, and competitive skiing, snow skiing, water skiing, all of these outdoor sort of sports, ice hockey. My friend from Canada, one of my best friends was from Canada and moved across the street from me, introduced me to ice hockey. So all of these sports, I just kind of, I don't know, I loved competition. I loved sports. I loved athletics, and I was a very active kid. So there you have it. And obviously involved into martial arts.
Sure.
Um, you know, so.
Well, then my curiosity then also is some of the greatest athletes of all time. We look to Tom Brady, of course, or Muhammad Ali is one of the greatest boxers of all time, if not the greatest boxer of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar all have great success, but not all athletes at the high school level or even younger level can achieve that. It's a very small, minuscule amount. So for yourself, what does it say about your desire to succeed and achieving this success at a local, regional, all the way to a world level as a young person in their teens and their 20s, besides, before you got into acting?
Um, I think for me, I think that a couple things contributed to my success. Number one, swimming. Why? Because you use every muscle group in your
Yeah,
body to swim. And you're building resistance against the water. And what that means is I had excellent body coordination, hand-eye coordination, just through competitive drills and swimming. I'm not sure that other sports would give you at an early age that same build those neural pathways in your brain and that connection with your body the way that swimming does. There are other sports, of course. So that's the first thing is uh, the the control over my body that I had. I think from initially being a swimmer, even in stunt work in Hollywood or some of the things that I've done there, is probably at a higher level than a lot of people had access to. So that's number one. Number two, I found out early on that mindset is everything.
sure.
At an early age, I was already visualizing winning swimming races. I was already talking to myself, self-talk in a positive way. So I realized that the power of the mind, I can remember when I was first introduced to that, backstroke was not my stroke. Butterfly and freestyle were my two main strokes. Backstroke I was okay, but you know, I wasn't I wouldn't call myself a great backstroker. And I remember this one meet where I just said to myself, I just kept talking to myself, I'm going to win this race. I'm going to win this race. And my times, the fastest swimmers are in the center of the pool. They're in lane 3 and 4. I was over there in lane 6. My times weren't that great, in backstroke. And I can just remember talking to myself and visualizing, and I'm going to win this race. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win this race. I saw myself winning this backstroke race. And not only did I win, I improved my time by 16 seconds.
There you go.
Yeah, in a 200 backstroke. That's a lot of time,
Yeah,
you know. So I realized early on that mindset is everything, that the power is as important to control the mind and develop the mind and train the mind as it is to train the body and train techniques and train skills and everything. And I think that younger athletes in high school who have the talent don't realize that. It's not tangible, right? If I
sure.
go into the gym and I grab a weight bar and I'm lifting 150 pounds or whatever, that's tangible. You can feel that. You can feel your muscles getting stronger. It's really more subtle and more difficult to feel whether your mind is getting stronger or not.
Yeah,
And so I think convincing younger athletes, because I've coached a lot of them, that focus and visualization and self-talk and these types of things are just as important, if not more important, than your physical training. It's a tough conversation to have with the younger athlete, and
sure.
it's the younger ones who get that. I think that go further. They take their
Yeah.
talent further. So yeah.
Well, speaking of coaching and teaching and instructing, and you mentioned it in your book, obviously Pat Morita and the advice he was giving to Daniel in The Karate Kid and the later films as well were vital to his success. And you look at it in the book from a deeper perspective, which you mentioned that you're looking at a really simplified version of these lessons. it also comes down to, yeah, sure, your success and what your mindset is as the athlete, but also who's helping you achieve those levels as well as a coach and a teacher and instructor. And in other interviews in the book, you mentioned a few. I mentioned them in the introduction. With the success you had and what the role the coach or the teacher has in it, how much of that experience, seeing how they help you, do you transfer into your time as teacher, instructor, coach for these athletes, and how much does it change, and how much do you try to fix it so then it's more plausible and effective these days?
So I would say my martial arts instructor, my sensei, was my own personal Mr. Miyagi,
Yeah,
and he had a way of speaking and talking about life and about personal character and about mindset that nobody had ever talked to me before. He took it to a whole nother level, like
sure,
the swimming coach or or the golf coach. He took it to a different level, and it was more spiritual, more metaphysical, more philosophical. And I don't know what it is, but I just absorbed that stuff like a sponge. It like spoke to my heart and my soul, not just not just my ears. And I just absorbed it. And so that he took it to another level and really inspired me to do the same. So when I opened up my own dojo and I started training my own students, I was down in LA. He was up in Reno. So guess what? There was a little bit of a rivalry with
yeah,
my own sensei, with my students who I would train in a way that he taught me, but I took it to my own sort of way of being
sure.
and doing and coaching and training and a lot of my students would beat his students quite a bit, quite often. So
There
there
you
was
go.
this there was a little bit of rivalry, but anyway, so yeah, finding the right teacher in martial arts, finding the right coach in any sport that resonates with you and
Sure,
speaks to you is vital. It's really important, and it made me go even further
sure.
with the power of the mind, looking at the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind, getting training in hypnosis and neuro linguistic programming. That's Tony Robbins' background. That's
Yeah,
how he started, and psychology and sports psychology and spirituality, even a lot of research and spirituality for myself. So, all of that sort of encompasses into the way I do my No Mercy Monday posts on
sure.
Instagram, right? Or write a book like The Hidden Life Lessons of Mr. Miyagi. I put a lot of that stuff in there. And I think it makes a difference for people. It sure has made a difference for me.
You mentioned, or I mentioned one of the instructors or coaches that you had, teachers. You mentioned in another interview was Wally J, and a certain person he would bring along being Don Jacobs. And Don Jacobs in particular seemed like a very interesting, very hardcore personality and how he would go about things with his other students. How intimidating was that for you as a person, but also making sure that that's not necessarily the way you want to instruct kids and adults in the same sports area that you're a part of.
Yeah, Don Don Jacobs is definitely an interesting guy, and for sure one of my biggest inspirations in the martial arts. Just because of he did techniques and he did his own thing and did things that I'd never seen before, and it wasn't like in the movies, right? It wasn't like when he would do a dive roll over five people standing back to back, standing up erect, not like
Yeah,
on their knees or anything like that. He would do a dive roll over the top of them without a trampoline, without even mats. You know, this guy was definitely an inspiration, and he had a lot of philosophy too. He would speak very spiritual and philosophical too, and metaphysical even. But he came from Trinidad, the
uh,
streets of Trinidad. He would talk about it. It's not America. America, if you beat your students up and make them bleed or whatever, you might end up with a lawsuit.
yeah,
Um, Trinidad's different, and he would talk about the streets, of Trinidad. It's a tough neighborhood, and you had to be tough, and he was tough on his students.
Yeah.
I did get kicked by him one time, and I'll never forget it. You know, it like shocked my entire body. But I've seen him make his students bleed from the nose and mouth.
Sure.
He doesn't pull his, I mean, he pulls his punches to a degree in for demonstration purposes, but he would do that stuff on his students, and I would be like, "Oh my God, you know, like, he's hitting them hard, you know," and they were
Yeah.
tough. They were just so tough. And he said, and he would say it, I have to do this. We
Yeah.
have to be this way because Trinidad is no joke. The
Yeah.
back streets of Trinidad is no joke. And so, anyway, I thought that was interesting. Him trying to come over to America and teach American students and have to strike that balance between
Yeah.
the way he taught in Trinidad and the way he taught here. So, anyway, there's martial arts is a unique thing in that its core has its roots in wartime and in survival, you know. And so when you talk about confidence and focus and discipline in the martial arts, you're talking about life or death.
Yeah.
That's the roots of martial arts. That's not the root of basketball.
Sure.
You know, if you lose a basketball game, you lose a
It's fine.
basketball
Yeah.
game. I'm not saying I like to lose. I'm not saying winning is a good thing, but if you lose on the streets, you lose your life sometimes.
Sure.
So it's a different thing. It's a different philosophy. It comes from a different place than normal sports does. So I think that's what makes martial arts a little bit more serious when you throw out words like mastery
Yeah.
or confidence or self-esteem or respect, you know.
Beyond sports and that being a successful part of your life, you're well known for another avenue, acting and theater and that sort of thing. And you became very successful and very involved and interested and hooked into that profession. When did that come into fray of saying, that's interesting. I've done a lot in the sports arena, and now I want to sort of see how this is like at a younger level.
Yeah, so my manager, my first manager I ever had, he also was from Reno, and he comes from the Hera family. So if you know anything about Hera's Club, um, his uncle was Bill Hera, who
Uh,
owned and started the Hera's Club in Reno, Nevada, and he was an actor. He was a child actor. He was actually one of the people on the Mickey Mouse Club way back in the day. I'm talking about. So and not one of the main stars, but he was, and so he was one of the extras. He started a theater group in Reno, Nevada. So my first exposure was doing theater, live theater, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's because I'm an only child and I just like the attention, you know.
yeah.
But we would be on stage, and my first show I ever did was Peter Pan, and I played one of the pirates, Smee. And so it was just, I don't, it was magical. Like he brought
Yeah.
in the guy who flew Dumbo on
Oh,
Broadway with the cables and everything, and like the elephant, like he flew an
sure.
elephant on Broadway. He came in to and flew the guy who played Peter Pan. But I remember one day during rehearsals, he let all of us, all the cast, experience flying on stage with the cables and everything,
Sure.
and it was awesome to be able to soar across the stage and then back across the stage and with the and so and then there was the theater lights and the audience and everything, and so I was just fell in love with it right from that, and so right from that point. And so I would I joined that theater group and would do plays and on stage stuff and musicals, and then one day he took a handful of us to Hollywood. We would drive from Reno, Nevada to Hollywood, and he got us an agent, and it started from there. So I would be traveling back and forth from Reno to LA to Reno to LA for auditions, get a part,
Sure.
you know, work on the movie, then go back home, and then when it came time for me to decide what am I going to do with the rest of my life, I was already in the University of Nevada, Reno, going to school. I just chose to move to LA and pursue it. So
Well, and
yeah.
the rest is sort of history, as they say. One of the main reasons why I want to talk to you today, it's a big portion of the book, and last year in 2024, there was the 40th anniversary of the Karate Kid, which you star in as Bobby Brown. No, not the song title of Frank Zappa's song from a few decades ago, but the character Bobby Brown. And the story goes as you, of course, well known, you were there. You get the audition from your a member of your team, you get it, and you're the only person who actually knows karate or martial arts, I should say, in general. And you have to downplay that you know that your team tells you if they don't mention it, don't make that your MO, don't make that your whole identity, only if they ask you about it. With that audition 40 years ago, how frustrating was that aspect of not being able to say, "Oh, I know the stuff," and then having to sort of do what they say before you end up getting your own choreography for the film?
It wasn't frustrating at all, and I'll tell you
Okay.
why. Because back then, if you were a martial artist like a Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal, if you were trying to be an action star and you were known for that, you were not considered a good actor. You were considered a martial artist
Yeah,
who you're going to put in an acting role. And I was into the acting part. So I always tried to downplay my martial arts because I wanted to be known as an actor.
sure.
Um, and so for this job, I thought it was interesting because the title of the movie is The Karate Kid.
Yeah,
But my agent did tell me, don't say anything initially. Just don't, they're focused on your acting. You've got the Academy Award winning director of Rocky, John Avildsen, as the director. And a lot of people forget about that. And they're going to be looking for your acting skills, and they're not going to. And if you're athletic, if you're young, they'll see that. They'll see
yeah,
you're a California looking guy. You know, you're fit. You have athletic ability. I'm sure their first look is for acting, and
sure.
so that's what I did. I had kept my mouth shut until later on, like 6 weeks into rehearsals, training for the film. Pat Johnson noticed it. And because one martial artist can pick out another you can pick out
Sure.
somebody who's had training because they hold their body differently, they hold their stance differently, they move differently than a black belt moves differently than a white belt.
Yeah.
And Pat Johnson saw it, and so he came up to me and he said, "Yeah, you've been trained before, right?" And I had to kind of let him know. So yeah,
One of the stories I like about that you share in there about your life, and I guess you could call it humility and learning in the moment, was when you're having breakfast with the rest of the gang of Cobra Kais, and you're told, "Oh, you need to be on the set ready to start shooting or performing," and everyone gets their gi, they get their outfit, they all have their black belts except for Ron Thomas, and Ron Thomas is saying, "What the H? Where is my black belt?" They finally get it for you. You're like, this is too stiff. This is not right. Let me put it into place because I've experienced this and I'm probably the best martial artist in the whole group. You end up finding out that it was somebody else's that just got the other day. In terms of humility and learning about yourself and just being a human, how eye-opening was that experience for you as both a person but also as an actor?
yeah. So here's the story. We all were really excited to see the black and gold karate gi, our gis that were for the tournament with our Cobra Kai patches and everything. And so that day you're talking about is the day that we've got them and we got to put them on. And like you said, I didn't have my black belt. I'm like, where's my black belt? And I don't know whose mistake that was. Somebody in wardrobe didn't have my black belt, didn't get one. They had to borrow one, and they borrowed one from a kid who was. We called in all of these extra black belt fighters who were real black belts from around LA to come in and do some of the stunt fighting for the tournament. And they borrowed one from this one kid, and they didn't tell me about it. They just said, "Here's your black belt. Now go film." Right? And I'm looking at this black belt. Now, if you're a martial artist, you know that a black belt, a belt is when it's stiff, it's new.
Yeah.
And I didn't think Bobby was a new black belt. I think he'd been a black belt for at least a year, maybe 2 years. And so I tried really hard, really fast to wear this belt in to fray it so some white strings were sticking out. And I took a nail file and I was working the edges of this black belt and I was working this belt over, and I put it in water a little bit and I was rubbing it, just trying to break it in so it hung it didn't hang on my body stiff. It kind of, relaxed. If you see my real black belt, which is somewhere in my house, it's almost white,
Yeah.
from years and years of tying it and training. And so I tried to have that effect with this particular belt. And then we shot the tournament stuff. It's all over. And they give the belt back to the kid. And I'm in my dressing room and I'm putting on my stuff. And I get a knock on my dressing room door from our second AD, Hope Goodwin. And she's got this black belt with, and he's got tears in his eyes. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? She goes, Ron, did you did you work this? Did you do something to this belt? And I said, yeah, because I didn't know, right? They
Yeah.
just handed me a belt. I thought it was from wardrobe. Did you do something with this belt? And I said, yeah, I thought it was too stiff. I think Bobby was a black belt, has been a black belt for a while, and the belt was a little bit too stiff. And so I did work it over, and so it would hang better and look better on me. And she goes, that's not your responsibility. That's wardrobe's responsibility. And
Yeah.
I said, but Hope, Bobby is a black belt. He's been a black belt for a while. It's not your responsibility. Your job is to act. It's wardrobe's job to determine what you're going to wear. And I'm like, okay. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see John Avildsen walking over.
Uh-oh.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is a bigger deal than I thought. He goes, she's told me, she said, this kid, well, I don't remember his name. This is his belt. And he just got promoted to black belt. And this belt was given to him by his sensei like 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, because I'm a black belt, so I
Yeah.
know what that means. When you're given your brand new black belt by your sensei, the belt has a lot of symbolism in it, and not to mention energy, what they call ki or chi.
Yeah.
The belt holds your energy, it holds your knowledge, it holds your experience. It's very important to someone especially someone who just received it,
Yeah.
And I kind of destroyed this belt that this kid sensei had given him, and the kid was just, in he was devastated.
Yeah.
So I felt really bad for the kid, and she had said those words, and by that time she had said those words to me, John Avildsen was already watching to see what I was going to do or how I was going to act, and I said, I could. What else could I say? I said, "You're right. I'm sorry," and I
Yeah.
apologized to the kid. You know, um, I don't think it was really my fault, but also it kind of was my fault because she had a point.
Yeah.
On the set, everybody has a job. Wardrobe has a job. The lighting people have a job. The actors have a job, and everybody should just stick to doing their job. So yeah, it was a lesson in humility, uh, for sure. So yeah.
There were, of course, in the films that came after Karate Kid 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, the TV show, video games, merch, all that stuff. But no villain in that franchise in particular, but in most others, came to the seriousness and the evilness and the scariness that was John Kreese. And I say that because that film, even though it was 40 years ago, and there are things about similar to that back then, it still holds true to the ability that someone evil like that has control over people and they think what they're doing is correct. And Bobby and the rest of the Cobra Kai thought what they were being taught was the correct way and that was the only option. Working with a character like that in the film, how do you take that approach and look at it from a wider angle as a human being, but also someone also who has had the experience of teaching kids in the art of martial arts?
Yeah, so that speaks to the brilliance of our writer, Robert Mark Kamen, and writing these characters, and also, of course, Marty Cove and his ability to play that character in such a scary way,
Yeah,
in an intimidating way. And so, my book, right? My book, The Hidden Life Lessons of Mr. Miyagi, is a book about life mastery. It's about mastery. Um, and nobody can argue that Mr. Miyagi was not a life master.
sure.
And I would say that nobody could argue that Kreese was not a life master. He was
Yeah,
not interested in mastery. he wasn't true master. He might have been interested in being called a master, like a lot of martial artists, unfortunately, in the real world, are interested in the title. It's a title that gets tossed around way too
Yeah,
often in the martial arts world in real life. And Kreese falls into that category. I mean, I think he was interested in being a master, being controlling. If you think of the word master, being dominating and intimidating, and the students, us, the Cobra Kai, were sort of hypnotized by all of that and sort
sure,
of intimidated by all that, and thought that you're right. Like we thought the Cobra Kai thought that that was the way of the martial arts, the way of the fist: strike first, strike hard, no mercy. But the true life master isn't interested in his own ego.
sure.
The true life master is interested in developing a student. And the goal of a martial arts master, a real one, who's interested in mastery, is to have their student be better than they were at whatever level they hit when they were at that level. So their goal is in developing the character of a mind, body, and spirit of a student, and that was Mr. Miyagi,
Yeah,
and that was his way, and that's true mastery, and it's why the audiences fell in love with him.
sure.
He was humble. It's why it's complete opposite, good and evil.
Yeah.
Mastery and a servant and the whole thing. So I mean, it's why he did not strike Kreese at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
or in the I guess it was Karate Kid 2. He just like at the car scene. He didn't he could have. He could have taken
Yeah,
Kreese out. And
exactly.
Kreese is like, go ahead, do it. No, instead he honks his nose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beautiful. And what better way to humiliate Kreese?
Yeah.
Not by hurting him, by honking his nose. It's fantastic.
Well,
So
well, you see what happens in that after that scene, and then of course what happens in Karate Kid 3, where he's down on his luck and he's not there anymore physically. Well, he is there physically, obviously, but he's not his normal self. He's a shell of himself, and Mr. Miyagi stays at this calm level. Daniel has all these issues that he's dealing with. Girl not progressing fast enough in martial arts. This stuff belt, not worrying about, as you mentioned in the book, how to properly fix and upkeep a bonsai tree. And there's Mr. Miyagi just calmly floating through life, giving his advice that on the surface may not seem like a lot, may seem confusing, but down below the surface level, there's a lot to deal with, which you talk about in the book. One of the last questions I want to ask about this universe before discuss some other things before we end today. In season two, as you well know, there's an episode where there's a mini reunion of the Cobras. You, Tony, Billy, and of course the late great Rob Garrison appears as well, which ended up being Rob's last probably performance in acting. As much as it probably would have been great to have not only everyone return, how do you, looking back on the show's over, that there wasn't a full return of the main Cobras of just yourself, Tony, and Billy, but of Rob continuing on and Chad possibly joining the program? Was there a sense that you had to sort of accept that and find the positive, or was there a moment where that tested you of saying, "Come on, why can't we get this going? Why can't this happen?" It's a little bit annoying.
uh, I had to accept it,
Yeah,
right? Because I can't speak for Chad. I mean, I know I know the backstory. I know the inside story. And they did try to get Chad. They
yeah,
tried to get him a few times, um, and he wouldn't do it for personal reasons. And then they even tried to get him in season 6, even just for a brief moment.
yeah,
And they had him. As far as I know, they were this close to having him. And then my understanding is lawyers stepped in, and anyway, they didn't get him. So it's unfortunate,
yeah,
especially for the fans who would have liked to seen Dutch show up at least for a little bit.
yeah,
Um, and what can I say? And then with Rob Garrison, he was not sick at the time of filming. Just so everybody knows, because that's a misunderstanding. He looked sick. I mean,
yeah,
I've got shots of him in the makeup trailer when they're putting on the white a makeup and everything. And I mean, the makeup artist did a great job on him. He was not sick. We did not know. He did not know what was about to transpire a year later. It was just, I don't know, art imitating life, life imitating art.
Yeah.
Just there's been a lot of synchronicity and a lot of strange stuff happen with Cobra Kai, with us, with kind of unexplainable stuff. The only way can explain it is sort of synchronicity. For example, when the four of us showed up to film Cobra Kai after all those years, not only was it magical, not only have we been friends all this time, not only was it awesome to be back in front of the camera, you know, recreating our characters once again and it seemed like there was no time. It seemed like we
Yeah.
stepped off the Karate Kid set and onto the Cobra Kai set. Not only all of that, but the day the cameras rolled for Cobra Kai, the day we all came back was Halloween. And guess
Okay.
what?
Yeah.
The day the cameras rolled for real on Karate Kid was
Halloween.
Halloween,
Wow.
all those years ago. So there's little synchronicities like that that are kind of unexplainable and strange, in a lot of ways. So, um, yeah. So anyway, I had to kind of, I think we all just kind of had to accept life. It's just life. Um, and it is what it is. But
Well, you talk about synchronicity, and obviously, Rob's character, is famous for that one line in the Karate Kid, put him in a body bag, and his character ends up being tagged away in a body bag. So that's a full circle moment. Uh,
yeah,
Beyond acting, as we just were talking about, of course, you come in the seasons of Cobra Kai throughout the show, and particularly the last bit of season 6. You also have become a very successful in another act of your life, a public speaker, inspirational speaker, and a writer and instructor of these practices as well. And of course, this well-known book, The Hidden Life Lessons of Mr. Miyagi, although it's kind of backwards right now. In a world, and you say in your book, it's a self-help book, as I mentioned, you really simplify these lessons that are learned in Karate Kid, and of course, somewhat in Cobra Kai. For you, in a world where there's a lot of books of this degree, self-help and helping one find their true potential, why was it important for you to write this book after all the books you've already written, but also ones that are already out there?
well, because it kind of ties my life experience and my brand as being a real life sensei, a martial artist, co-starring in a movie, beloved movie with the Karate Kid. Miyagi, I think Bobby would be more aligned with Mr. Miyagi than Kreese, right? I
Yeah,
think somebody asked me the other day on another interview if they think that Bobby continued training because okay. Here's the deal. So there's a scene that didn't get used, and it's out there. It's on YouTube now. It's out there in multiple platforms where Bobby hurts Daniel-san in the tournament and then takes his belt off, walks over to Kreese and throws his belt on the floor and leaves. Right now, that scene didn't get used because they needed Bobby to come back. They didn't want him split from the group. So they needed him to come back in Karate Kid 2. Um, so, at any rate, so that scene explains all you need to know about Bobby.
sure.
And somebody asked me, so what do you think Bobby would have done after? Do you think he would have continued training, even though he's a pastor now in karate? I think, yeah, he would have continued training. He probably would have gone over to Mr. Miyagi, and he would be more aligned. I I'm more aligned, obviously, with the philosophies of Mr. Miyagi, and so I wrote that book because it's it ties in my entire life
Sure,
uh, and the brand of Karate Kid and everything into that book. So my entire journey is sort of like these different paths wound up merging, and
sure.
then put them together in that book. And I thought the title was kind of cool, "The Hidden Life Lessons of Mr. Miyagi." What's hidden? What didn't we see but in
Yeah.
the original movie? What's underneath those lessons that we all saw on screen that we can all use in this chaotic, crazy world we're now living in? And so also, as a martial artist, one of the greatest joys and honors of being a sensei and teaching hundreds and hundreds of students is the same thing I got
Yeah.
is that, oh, you said something in that class. the way you spoke, the things you said, that's what changed my life. You changed my life. And I'm like, okay, like I'm going to get real serious for a second. I can remember one student who was considering suicide. And he messages me all these years later saying, if it wasn't for you and the way you were and the things you taught me about character and mindset and all of that, I might not be here. So thank you. And so the paying it forward aspect of the martial arts, it's not about how good you get
Sure.
in the techniques and all of that stuff and the martial arts, which is fun stuff. But it's about changing you here. It's like Miyagi said, karate is here, karate
Yeah.
here, never around the waist.
Sure.
And so I recognized a long time ago that lots of people want the philosophy and the life skills and the esoteric principles that martial arts teaches, but they don't necessarily want to go into a dojo and learn how to fight. They could care
Sure.
less about that part. And that's why I thought I'm going to take this stuff to the rest of the world that doesn't want to come into the dojo. I'm going to get on a stage and become a speaker. I like being on a stage anyway. It's where I started acting.
Yeah.
So, in a way, in a lot of ways, speaking is a performance. And and so I'll get on stage and I'll teach some of this esoteric principles and deliver some of these messages to a wider audience. And that includes a book. So um, there you have it. I forgot what your original question was, but I hope
No,
I hope that answered it.
oh no, it did. Well, my thing, this is me being honest. A lot of the stuff in there or some of the topics that you discuss, or some of the things that you have experience in learning in, are high level for me to wrap my head around. But this book does an excellent job at simplifying it and making it interesting and making me read it. Sometimes when you read a book, you're like, okay, I'm going to read 20 or 30 pages, and that's going to be it for the day. And then tomorrow I'll do again. And then when you get close to the end of to that amount, you lose focus, you lose attention, and you're trying to focus and you want to finish it as soon as possible. But for this book, whether it's late at night I'm reading or early in the morning, I was reading page after page after page after page, and it kept me hooked in the book because it's not your life story. It's things you've learned through your story of life, and you're telling these principles to help others. And I think that's a very powerful and important message as well, because you can't force anybody to do a certain thing. You can give them advice that you found successful. But it speaks to you in the magnitude of it. What do you hope as an author and as a speaker that this book does for people in general, not just for those looking to hear about things from Mr. Miyagi or that part of your life, but in general, whether they're looking to change their life or not?
Well, first of all, I appreciate everything you just said. And what I hope for the book is everything you just said.
Yeah,
Is that it changes people, it keeps them hooked. I think one of the things about the book is that each lesson in the book, each chapter is a
yeah,
standalone lesson. You don't have to read from beginning to end. You could just open up and read chapter 7, which is a lesson, a hidden lesson in and of itself. It doesn't have to be read from start to finish in that way. So I think that helps. That makes it a little bit different too in the self-help book industry. But I think I say somewhere in the beginning in the intro is, you may not agree with everything I say,
sure, yeah,
but you're going to find one thing in this book, that maybe more than one, that will help you. It will change everything. And I know for a fact that one thing can change everything. And so if you find that one thing in this book that changes everything for you, that for me is a success. So it's kind of like teaching martial arts. Like I just had that story about that one student. You could say lots of stuff, class
yeah.
after class, night after night to students, and they resonate with it, they like it, but you say that one thing that makes a difference, that changes everything for them, then man, that's so rewarding. But you've just done your job as a sensei. So same thing with the book. I've done my job as an author if I can make a difference in somebody's life. And it's really nice to hear the words. It's hard to put the book down. I've heard that a few times now, and it's really gratifying.
Before we end today, Ron, again, thank you so much for doing this. I want to end on a little fun segment called All This Is That. I'll throw out a few subjects, and you have to pick either this one or that one to your best ability. And if you're ready, we'll get going.
And so what's my responsibility here?
So
Say it
I'll
again.
throw out a few subjects. Most of these will revolve either around your professional life or things that happened during the Cobra Kai world, other films, or maybe you just have to pick which one you'd rather choose compared to the other one.
Okay.
So the first one, these two are Cobra Kai, as it's well known, not Cobra Kai, Karate Kid is well known as an 80s classic franchise, 80s classic film, and there are a few other great films that came out during that time, cheesy or otherwise. So the first one would be the Death Wish film series or the Lethal Weapon film series.
Lethal Weapon.
Back to the Future or Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, tough one. Um, Back to the Future.
Swimming or golf.
Oh God. Golf.
Don Jacobs or Professor Toru Tanaka.
Oh my God. Uh, Two different guys. Can I say both?
If that's what if that's what it is, I'll give you that one. Public
Okay.
speaking or writing a book.
Uh, Love doing both, but I would pick public speaking because I love interacting with people face to face.
And last but certainly never least, and this may be a tricky one, so apologies in advance. Ron Thomas, the actor, or Ron Thomas, the person?
The person.
Okay. Ron, as I just said, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the time to speak about this. I know you've been doing a lot of this since the books come out in December, so this is a real treat to a fan and a child of a fan of this movie in your career. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And by the way, let me just say this too. If you want a signed copy of the book, I will sign it. I got stacks of them here.
Yeah,
Go to my website, senseironthomas.com/shop on the products page of my website.
like
And
this right here.
there you go.
Yeah,
I will sign it to you. I will ship it to you domestically or internationally. Because I say that because you can get the book anywhere. It's
yeah,
out there. The thing is, if you want it signed, you're gonna have to see me at a Comic Con or a book signing somewhere, and that may or may never happen depending on where you live.
yeah.
So if I do sign copies and ship them out. So if and also autographed pictures from Cobra Kai and Karate Kid. So anyway, if you want any of that stuff personally signed by me, go to my website senseironthomas.com and I'll do it for you.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. You just said with the book on your website. Yeah, obviously you can get it on Amazon, places of that nature. Where can they find you on social media if you have it? Where would that be?
Yeah, Instagram is the real Ron Thomas, and then Facebook is at Sensei Ron Thomas. And follow me if you like this stuff. If you like personal development, if you like Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, I post quite a bit about all of that stuff and if you want to stay informed of what I'm up to, definitely follow me.
Well, here, listen to what the man said. Listen to what Ron said, because down the line, when he wins a Pulitzer Prize for this amazing book, and who knows where the podcast goes, you're gonna say, "Holy crap, I should have done that." Because if you've enjoyed this episode, do us a favor by subscribing on YouTube, follow us on the audio platforms, clicking that thumbs up, like button, turn on post notifications so you can stay up to date on the podcast. Help share the podcast by clicking that share arrow. Follow us on Instagram at Nolan Car Night or on Twitter at Nolan Car Night. In the words of Johnny Carson, Dean of talk shows just like this one. I bid you all a heartfelt good night. Till next time, take care.